Welcome back, everybody. Today we are testing the new Motiv Lethal Venom.
If you like what we do, follow us on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube. Don't forget to subscribe and check us out on Patreon.
First impressions, Motiv gives us a new benchmark level ball with the Lethal Venom. The Lethal Venom brings back the Gear APG asymmetric version of the gear core we know and love from the Venom Shock. This was in the Venom Recoil and the Black Venom. Basically, you have a control type low RG core with a control level differential, meaning not lots of flare, plus some lower level asymmetry to give it a bit more steering, if you will. The Leverage MXC Solid is interesting, the same cover that's on the Evolve and Sub-Zero. And that's actually a pretty nice way to visualize that while a cover and surface dictate 70% of the ball reaction, there's still a substantial impact a core has. On this particular house pattern, which is about 38 feet in medium light volume, the Lethal Venom simply feels like too much ball for me. I struggled to get it to hold until I got deep enough, so as I approach the fourth arrow, I find the pocket. However, I don't love this angle for me personally, and the ball itself doesn't love that angle, as it's a smoother type shape that will prefer to be a little bit more closed than that. Don't get me wrong, it wasn't terrible, but so eventually I increased the speed and moved back closer to the third arrow, and you can see the shape of the ball. Definitely reads the mid lane, has a strong but controlled back end motion. Kind of a straightforward benchmark area or mid control, if you will, in my arsenal building. May need to let the cover lane shine if you'll see this type of pattern and want to use it as a benchmark. It's a bit too strong out of box. Now here's a quick look compared to the Venom Shock, and with a touch of lane shine you can see it's a bit cleaner and more angular than the Lethal Venom. Exactly as they say in the chart, I can bowl from the same part of the lane, just get a different shape. Now let's bring in Brian next, and while it was too strong for me on this house pattern, it was a pretty good matchup for Brian. He did have to be near the third arrow to give this ball some room, but it looked pretty good and pretty easy to strike. He's in just enough to allow the stronger cover to get some length while the core starts up early, but smooth enough to have a nice balanced shape with good punch. It had a very predictable, smooth arc with good hit for Brian. Pretty straightforward, really. He couldn't move much further in, though, since it does lose some energy at that point. But he could transition to where he could open the angle more and push it to the outside, more friction without really having it completely die. Now here's a quick look at the Venom Shock, and the sharper move is very evident. A little less arcy than the Lethal Weapon. Next up is Tyler. Oddly, I have to say that Venom or Shock balls generally haven't been his favorite. They just seem to churn up nicely, but don't always make a consistent move for him. Don't really have a super good explanation. Sometimes balls that everyone likes simply don't actually work for everyone. It is what it is, and while Tyler still had his moments of inconsistent ball reaction with a Lethal Weapon, you still see a demonstration of the shape of the ball. Good balance of strength from the cover to the core. I've seen occasionally the gear core not quite have the oomph the cover has, but that doesn't seem an issue, at least with this lower volume pattern. Tyler had a little bit of over-under, sometimes deflecting, sometimes jumping hard through the pins. While he still has the same sort of gear core issues, you can clearly see the Venom Shock is a bit more logical for this pattern, with a cleaner and more angular look than the Lethal Venom is. Alright, so the bottom line started with the Motiv Lethal Venom, and I keep wanting to say Lethal Weapon. Fits in the mid-control category, albeit the cover might be a little strong. It brings a nice option to smoothness into that strength zone for Motiv. I think the cover makes it a clear step up from the Black Venom, but the Black might also fit a touch more squarely into the mid-control category. Bottom line is Motiv gives you options, and the Lethal is a nice one. For this part here, we wanted to take a quick look at the Lethal Venom on the 45-foot Route 66 Kegel Sport Shot pattern, 23.3 mils, 3.67 to 1 symmetric ratio. For me, right out of the gate, it was a perfect matchup. It's got the right amount of cover strength to blend that 45-foot length while offering enough punch with control to give me just a couple boards wiggle room at the break point. I was frankly thrilled with the Lethal Venom. For comparison, here's the Venom Shock, and while it's playable from the same line, it's less forgiving due to the cleaner and more angular nature. And then for context, Here's the Roto Grip Optimum Idol, which was my go-to on this pattern, so you get an idea. I'd say the Lethal Venom is almost like a baby Optimum Idol. Quick look at Tyler, and this was tougher than it should have been, I feel like, but it might come down to the tougher matchup with a gear core for him. This should work better, and while it looked decent, he really had to find a pretty precise spot down lane to get this to work. Probably, just 2 over under in this case. Just for awareness, the Optimum Idol is also his go-to on this pattern. So similar shape, but for some reason that works a lot better for him. For Brian, I hate to say it, but it was very difficult. So think back to what it looked like for me and him on the house shot. It was too much for me and just right for him. Now on this longer pattern, it's just right for me and too little for him. He couldn't use it from direct as the cover was too strong. So the ball would jump, and as he moved in to give the cover room, the core was too little, so he never really found a place where he could get the right balance of motion between the cover and core. And if this was League, he'd already be out of the ball because it simply doesn't match up. So this really gives you some clear idea of how the cover and core relate for the Lethal Venom. For lower rev bowlers, the Lethal Venom is bound to work pretty well on lower volume or shorter conditions as the friction balances the core. For medium or higher rev bowlers or those with a high track, the ball may feel too much for light patterns, but will feel good on higher or longer patterns as a benchmark.